I know you're at dinner with him right now. The text message was short, direct, and aimed to pierce her like a knife. I imagined her face turning pale as she sat across from her lover at some dimly lit restaurant, their conversation dying in their throats the second her phone vibrated. It was exactly 7:42 p.m., the time she told me she'd be out with the girls. But I knew better. I knew everything. It had been 4 months since I first saw the signs. Late-night work meetings, unexplained absences, that subtle shift in her demeanor whenever she was around me. Trust is like glass. Once it cracks, you notice every fracture, every weakness, until the entire thing shatters. But she didn't realize I had already started piecing together the truth. I stared at my phone, waiting. In the kitchen, the smell of takeout lo mein filled the house, the meal she didn't know I'd ordered. I figured if she was going to sneak around behind my back, I might as well treat myself. It was funny, in a twisted way. She didn't even suspect I'd figured it out. Her phone was probably on the table in front of her. I could picture her with that forced smile on her face, pretending everything was fine. But now she was squirming. I could feel it. 3 minutes passed, and nothing. No response. Good. I sent another message. Does he know that you're still married? I smiled to myself as I sent it. There was something satisfying about turning the tables like this. I hadn't been sure if I wanted to confront her like this, but the adrenaline rushing through my veins told me I made the right choice. Let her squirm. Let her try to explain herself. Finally, my phone buzzed. I glanced down at the screen. "What are you talking about?" she typed, playing dumb. She always thought she could outsmart me. Typical of her. I didn't bother with her charade. "You're at Il Tavolo right now, having dinner with that smug asshole." I know. Another silence. Longer this time. Il Tavolo, one of the nicest restaurants in town. Expensive, too. I'd taken her there for our anniversary a few years ago, before everything started to fall apart. Now she was there, laughing at some other guy's jokes, probably touching his hand under the table, the same way she used to touch mine. But tonight wasn't about memories. It was about breaking hers. My phone buzzed again. "This isn't what you think." I chuckled, shaking my head. Of course, that's what she'd say. It's what they all say when they're caught. My fingers danced across the screen. "Isn't it? Go on, let me guess. He's just a friend? Or maybe a colleague from work? Someone you just happened to run into? That's what you're going to tell me next, isn't it?" I stood up, pacing around the kitchen, every step heavy with the rage that had been building up for months. I could feel my blood pressure rising, but there was a strange clarity in the moment. Every doubt I'd ever had about her melted away, leaving only the cold, hard truth. She was cheating. She had betrayed me. The phone buzzed again. "You're wrong. Please, let's talk about this when I get home." I couldn't stop the laugh that escaped my lips, bitter and hollow. Home? That wasn't our home anymore. Not when she had been building her own little world with someone else on the side. She wasn't coming home. Not tonight. Not ever. "No, let's talk now," I typed furiously. "Or do you want me to come down to Il Tavolo and we can discuss it in person?" This time, the response came quicker. "Don't, please." There it was, the fear. She didn't want me to show up and ruin her perfect little evening. Didn't want to be exposed in front of her lover like the liar she was. But I had already ruined it. I could feel it in her desperate pleas. I imagined her sitting there, her face growing hot with shame, the man in front of her starting to realize something wasn't quite right. Maybe they had already exchanged nervous glances. Maybe they were wondering if they should just leave. But she wasn't going to walk away from this. Not until I was done. It hadn't always been like this. There was a time when I believed we were happy, when our marriage felt strong, untouchable, the kind of relationship other people envied. But now, standing alone in our empty house, the silence almost deafening, I couldn't even pinpoint when it had started to fall apart. Was it my fault? Was it hers? It didn't matter anymore. My mind flashed back to the first time I suspected something was wrong. It was subtle at first, little things I could have easily ignored. The way her phone was suddenly always face down on the table, how she'd step into another room to take calls, the sudden influx of work trips that never seemed to have specific dates. But the moment I knew, really knew, was the night she came home late, her hair a little too perfect, her smile a little too forced. She kissed me on the cheek like nothing was wrong, but I could smell the cologne on her, not hers, not mine. "Who is he?" I'd asked that night, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and dread. She laughed it off, calling me paranoid. "Don't be ridiculous," she said, brushing it aside as if I was imagining things. But I wasn't. I'd spent weeks after that night digging, checking her phone when she left it unattended, tracking her location when she claimed to be at work. And then, 2 weeks ago, I found it. The text messages. They weren't overt, nothing so obvious as "I love you" or "I can't wait to see you again." No, they were smart, casual, hidden beneath layers of plausible deniability. "Had a great time today," one read. Another, "Next time, let's try that sushi place." But I knew. I'd pieced it together. The lunches, the dinners, the secret meetings she thought she was so clever about. And tonight, I decided, was the night I'd blow it all up. The phone buzzed again, interrupting my thoughts. Her name lit up the screen, but I didn't need to read it to know what she would say next. Apologies, excuses, anything to wriggle out of the truth I'd caught her in. "I'm sorry," she wrote. "I'll come home. We can talk. Please don't do anything rash." I shook my head, disgusted. Sorry wasn't going to cut it. I had given her chances, so many of them. And every time she'd chosen to lie to my face. She wanted to save face, to avoid the confrontation. But she didn't deserve that. I typed my response, my fingers steady despite the anger boiling inside of me. "There's no point in talking. You're done." There was no reply this time, no desperate plea. Maybe she knew I meant it, or maybe she was too busy trying to salvage the pieces of her perfect little affair at that fancy dinner table. I didn't care. My phone rang. Her name appeared on the screen, but I didn't answer. I watched it vibrate in my hand, the way I imagined her pulse was racing. The irony wasn't lost on me. For months, she'd hidden her betrayal behind a screen, and now here I was, exposing it the same way. I let the call go to voicemail. A few seconds later, another message appeared. "Don't leave me like this. Let me explain." Explain. There was nothing to explain. She'd made her choice, and I had made mine. This was done. I started typing one last message, my fingers moving quickly, but I paused, a new thought forming in my mind. Why stop at just a message? Why let her control the narrative? I walked over to the dining room window and peered out. The night was still, the sky a deep, inky black. A part of me considered driving down to the restaurant, showing up, confronting her and her lover face to face, watching the shock and shame flood their expressions. But that wasn't my style. No, I had something better in mind. I pulled up my phone and scrolled through my contacts. There was one person I hadn't told about this yet. One person who needed to know. Her mother. I'd always gotten along with her mom, even after the cracks in our marriage started to show. She was a straight talker, never sugarcoated anything. And I knew, without a doubt, that she would be just as furious as I was when she found out what her daughter had done. I hit call, a smile forming on my lips as the phone started to ring. "Hello?" Her mother's voice, warm and familiar, sounded like a lifeline on the other end of the phone. I hesitated for just a second, wondering if this was crossing a line. But the anger swelled in my chest again, pushing the doubt aside. "Hi, Susan. It's Jake." "Jake, sweetie, is everything okay?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. Everything was far from okay, but the way she called me sweetie made me remember just how deep this betrayal cut. Susan always treated me like family, like her own son, and now her daughter had taken a sledgehammer to everything I thought we had built together. "No, Susan, things aren't okay," I said, my voice tight. "I need to tell you something you need to hear from me." There was a pause on her end. She probably sensed something serious in my tone. "What's going on? You sound upset." I could feel the weight of what I was about to say settling into my chest, heavy and suffocating. There was no easy way to do this. But then again, there hadn't been an easy way to live through this either. "Susan," I began, my voice shaking with both anger and sadness. "Rachel's cheating on me." The line went silent. I could hear her breathing, but she wasn't saying anything. For a moment, I thought she'd hung up, unable to process what I just said. Then, in a soft, broken voice, she whispered, "What did you say?" "She's been seeing someone else behind my back," I continued, forcing myself to remain calm. "I found out about it weeks ago. I tried giving her the benefit of the doubt, tried to believe she'd come back to me. But tonight, she's at dinner with him, right now. I just wanted you to know." The silence stretched on again, and I could almost feel Susan's heart breaking on the other end of the phone. She had always believed in our marriage, in the life we were building. She was the one who had told me over and over that we were soulmates, meant to be together. But now that lie had unraveled, and she was caught in the crossfire. "Jake, I don't know what to say." Her voice was shaky, like she was holding back tears. "Are you sure? I mean, maybe this is a misunderstanding." I sighed, the weariness of months of suspicion finally catching up to me. "I wish it were. I've seen the texts. I've tracked her location. She's been lying to me, Susan. I'm sorry to put this on you, but I thought you should know." The sound of Susan sniffling hit me harder than I expected. It was one thing to deal with my own pain, but knowing I was crushing someone else who had no part in this was like twisting the knife deeper. "I can't believe she'd do this," Susan murmured. "Rachel, she's never been like this. She loves you, Jake. She always talked about how much she loved you." The words stung. I'd heard them too, countless times. But love wasn't enough, was it? Not when she was sneaking around with someone else. Love had become just another lie she told to keep me from seeing the truth. "I loved her too," I said softly. "But that doesn't change what's happening." Susan let out a long breath, like she was trying to hold herself together. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet," I admitted, "but I'm not letting her walk all over me anymore." Susan was quiet for a moment, then she spoke, her voice firmer this time. "Jake, whatever happens, you don't deserve this. I'm so sorry. I'll talk to her. I'll make sure she understands what she's done." And then I wasn't sure what that would accomplish, but it felt good to know I had someone in my corner. "Thanks, Susan. I really appreciate that." We hung up after a few more strained words, and I set the phone down on the counter, feeling both drained and oddly lighter. The damage was done, but at least now the truth was out in the open. Rachel would no longer be able to hide behind her lies. Her mother knew. Soon, everyone would know. The house felt too quiet again, the weight of the silence pressing down on me. I checked my phone. Still no messages from Rachel. She was probably panicking now, trying to figure out how to fix this. But she couldn't. Not anymore. I decided I wasn't going to sit around and wait for her to come home, begging for forgiveness. I grabbed my jacket and keys and headed out the door, the cool night air hitting me as I stepped outside. I needed to get away from the house, away from all the memories of what we used to be. I started driving with no real destination in mind. The city lights blurred around me as I sped through the empty streets. My mind raced, replaying every moment of our relationship, every smile, every laugh, every kiss that now felt like a lie. How had we gotten here? How had she thrown it all away for some random guy? My phone buzzed on the passenger seat, pulling me out of my thoughts. I glanced over and saw Rachel's name flashing on the screen again. Another message. I ignored it. I didn't want to hear her excuses. I didn't want to hear anything from her. But the phone buzzed again. And again. Curiosity got the better of me. I pulled over to the side of the road, picked up the phone, and opened her messages. "I'm coming home," she had written. "Please, Jake, let's talk." Then another one. "I made a mistake. I'll explain everything. Just let me come home. Nah. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a second before I typed back, "There's nothing to talk about." I waited, staring at the screen, waiting for her to respond. But instead, a call came through. I watched the phone vibrate in my hand, her name glowing on the screen. My thumb hovered over the decline button, but something made me pause. Maybe it was the tiny sliver of hope that she had some kind of explanation, something that would make all of this make sense. Or maybe it was just the need to hear her voice one last time. I answered. "Jake," she breathed, her voice filled with desperation. "Please don't do this. Let me come home. Let me explain." I stayed silent, my grip tightening on the phone. "I'm sorry," she continued, her words rushing out in a panicked flurry. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. It was just—" "What?" I cut her off, my voice colder than I expected. "Just a mistake? Just a fling? How long has it been going on, Rachel? How long have you been lying to me?" She hesitated. "It's not like that. I swear. I love you, Jake." I laughed, the sound harsh and bitter. "You love me? You've been sleeping with another man and you have the nerve to say you love me?" "It wasn't about him," she insisted. It was just something I needed to figure out. I was confused, Jake, but I know now. I know I want to be with you. Please, let me come home. We can fix this." "Fix this?" I repeated, incredulous. "How do you fix betrayal, Rachel? How do you fix the fact that you've been lying to me for months?" She was crying now. I could hear it in the way her voice trembled. "I'm sorry. I'm so, so sorry. I'll do anything. Just please don't throw us away." I leaned my head back against the seat, staring up at the dark sky through the windshield. "You already threw us away," I said quietly. "The second you decided to cheat on me, you made your choice." There was a long silence on the other end. I could hear her breathing, shaky and uneven, like she was struggling to find the right words. "Please," she whispered, "don't leave me." I closed my eyes, the weight of everything pressing down on me. I wanted to scream at her, to lash out, to make her feel the same pain she had caused me. But instead, I just felt empty, hollow. "You should have thought about that before," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm done, Rachel." And with that, I hung up. The next few days passed in a blur of anger, sadness, and confusion. Rachel had come home, of course. She had sat on the couch crying, pleading with me to hear her out, but I couldn't even look at her. Every time she opened her mouth, all I could think about were the lies that had spilled from her lips for months. I slept in the guest room that night. It was better that way. I needed space to think, to process what my life had become. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them together, her and her lover, laughing, touching, doing all the things that were supposed to be ours. Susan had called the next morning. She apologized again, told me she was furious with Rachel. But there was only so much she could do. It wasn't her marriage that had fallen apart. It was mine. The following week was filled with awkward silences and broken conversations. Rachel tried to explain herself, tried to justify what she'd done. She blamed stress, loneliness, anything but her own selfishness. I listened, but the words never reached me. I had already made up my mind. One night, I came home from work to find her sitting on the floor, surrounded by boxes. Her face was tear-streaked, her eyes red and puffy. She looked up at me, a silent question in her gaze. "I'm moving out," she said softly. "It's clear you don't want me here." I didn't say anything. I just watched as she packed up her things, one by one, like she was packing up pieces of our life together and throwing them away. It hurt, but it was a necessary pain. We couldn't go back to the way things were, not after what had happened. When she finally left, the house felt emptier than ever. I stood in the middle of the living room, staring at the space where her boxes had been, and realized that this was it, the end of everything. In the weeks that followed, I tried to move on. I went back to work, spent time with friends, tried to keep myself busy. But no matter what I did, the weight of the betrayal clung to me like a shadow. Every time I thought I was starting to heal, something would remind me of her, of what she'd done, and the wound would reopen. Susan checked in on me every now and then. She apologized for her daughter's actions, but there was nothing she could say to make it better. Rachel had made her choice, and I was left to pick up the pieces. It wasn't easy. There were nights when I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering where it had all gone wrong. But slowly, piece by piece, I began to rebuild my life. I didn't need her. I didn't need the lies. I was going to be okay. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but someday.